Okay. Everyone, welcome. Thank you for your time with this month's Rapido Monthly Update for May 2025. My name is Megan Weldon, a product manager here at Clarivate for the resource sharing team. There's my email address so that we can follow up if you have any questions from today's content. We can connect via email or please put them in the chat. And at the end of today's session, I'll work through your questions that you share. Today's session will follow a familiar agenda if you are a regular at our Rapido monthly updates. First, a few topics for the Rapido community. Then, I will cover a few of the upcoming highlights for the next monthly release. So, today that will be speaking to the release highlights for the June 2025 release. Following that will be a few frequently asked questions that have come up in recent conversations with the Rapido community. And within the frequently asked questions time, I will address the questions that you put forward in the chat today. So, first off, our wonderful Rapido community, here are a few highlights of things going on that may be of interest to those in the Rapido community. Always of interest to the Rapido community is new membership and new libraries implementing Rapido. So, congratulations to George Mason University, Messiah University, and University of Arizona for completing their Rapido implementations in May this year. Welcome you into the Rapido community and exciting for all of the resource sharing that you'll partake in. Okay, a save the date reminder for libraries in the Rapido community. The 2025 Rapido and Rapid ILL enhancement voting will begin on June 2nd. The working group will be putting out information via the listserv for that. And so the curve enhancement cycle voting will begin June 2nd. A few additional kind of save the date mentions to put forward today. A few opportunities for us to say see you there. The first one I have on this slide is an opportunity to say see you there to our see you there in London for our UK and Ireland resource sharing community members. This will be on June 12th at the Clarivate London office to discuss resource sharing for the UK and Ireland resource sharing communities. I have a registration link at this as relevant to you at your library that I will share at the end of today's slides. Another great opportunity coming up to say see you there is the Northwest Interlibrary Loan Conference. This takes place in September the 9th through 11th. It is in person at the University of Oregon, Portland, and virtually as well. There'll be Rapido colleagues there for us, and we look forward to seeing you there. So if you're going to be there, reach out, say hi. We look forward to connecting with you at that event as well. And one more upcoming opportunity for us to say see you there and get connected is the Aluna Conference taking place June 16th through 20th in Atlanta, Georgia. This is a great event, and it is our first time that there'll be a Rapido session at the Aluna Knowledge Days. In addition to the Rapido session at Aluna Knowledge Days, I see a lot of exciting sessions on the agenda, quite a few Rapido product updates, but many great sessions and resources put forward by the resource sharing community. If you'll be at any of these events and you want to connect, please reach out. We look forward to setting up time and seeing you there. If you won't be at these events but also want to connect, we also welcome the opportunity to connect with you. So please reach out so we can set up the conversations to touch base with you and your resource sharing team at your library. Okay, next, a few developments that are highlights for the June 2025 release. The first development coming to you in June is based from the Community Idea Exchange. So the Idea Exchange is an avenue that libraries can put forward ideas and show support for different ideas for developments for Rapido. One of the ideas that was put forward was to show the lending library's name on the receive items screen within the borrowing workflow, and so you'll see that with the June release. So, what does that look like? So, in your borrowing workflow, you may perform the receive action to update the request to receive via a variety of different pathways. I'll show these different pathways and what it looks like with the June release onward, and that the lending library name will now be visible. So perhaps you're a library that likes to update the requests from the request itself via the receive action as shown on the screen here. If you perform that pathway to receive your items, you'll see the lending library's name. So this is what that screen will look like with the June release to help you have that information within your borrowing workflow to confirm that the item that you're receiving matches the lending library on the screen there. Perhaps you're a library that performs the receive action under the fulfillment, resource requests, scan and items view. If you work this workflow, you'll also see that lending library's name to you during the scan and items for updating those physically borrowed items. Or perhaps you're a library that updates items via the fulfillment, resource sharing, receiving items screen. If that is your preferred workflow of choice, you'll also see the lending library's name on that receiving items screen as well. So, regardless of how you approach updating your borrowing requests, whether that is from the receive action, the scan in items, or the receiving items menu, you'll now have that lending library's name visible to you within your borrowing workflows. The next release that I want to highlight for the June 2025 release also came to us via a community process. This one came in through the Curve Enhancement process that took place in 2024 to add items to the 2025 roadmap. For a reminder, there were three different items that the community votes put forward onto our 2025 roadmap. One of those was completed with the May release, the closing periods, due dates, and renewals. That was available in the May release, so you can check out the May release highlights or the recording of the May release webinar for more information. And let me know if you have any questions. The next item that it will be speaking to is being delivered in the June release, and that's the reject reasons being customizable. The third item that was added to the curve enhancements for 2025 was the Rapido to parse more volume formats, and that is coming soon in an upcoming release. So back to the reject reasons being customizable. Let me introduce that development and show you what that looks like with your June release. Through the curve enhancement process, the libraries identified the need for the customized lending reject reasons, as libraries wanted to customize the lending reject reasons that they see at their library. Today, the lending reject reasons are determined by ISO standards and are thus communicated between resource sharing solutions. So we did not want to and could not change the actual lending reject reasons set by those standards. However, we were able to add an option to add customized internally visible reject reasons. Let me show you how you can do that at your library. So if you want to add internally visible customized reject reasons, you'll see that there's a new configuration pathway to do so. Under configuration, resource sharing configuration, there is the new menu, internal reject reasons. Here you'll see this new table where you can add the code and the description. And once you have those reasons added, they'll be visible to you within your reject action and also within your request attributes. I'll show you what that looks like here in the next slide. Here we have a lending request that we are rejecting. We are choosing the reject reason that gets communicated to our partner, again, set by those ISO standards. Here I've selected the option of poor condition. Because I've added the additional internal reject reasons via my configuration of the internal reject reasons, I also have that options there to select. I've chosen to select the requires mending option that I added. Um, as a library, you can use internal reject reasons. You do not have to, they are not mandatory. So you can continue to work as you do with your reject reasons today. You can also then give further information for your internal reasons. Once I reject this request and I have given my reject reasons and my internal reject reason, I have that visibility within the request attributes. So here I have access that that lending request that I have rejected. It is now at the rejected the borrower request status. And within the request attributes section, I see the reason being the poor condition that I chose and the internal reject reason that I chose of requires mending, also visible there. So if you want to customize your internal lending reject reasons, you can now do so with the June release. The next highlight is related to the ebook resource sharing. So here you'll see a new screenshot or a screenshot that might look a bit different than you're used to in the discovery. And that is that you now have the option to present 3 different tiles for a request when it is relevant to do so. So when the ebook functionality was released in January 2025, that initial rollout enabled libraries to begin sharing ebooks through Rapido and begin allowing your users to request ebooks through Rapido. However, prior to the June release, your end users' option to select the ebook versus the physical offer was determined by pod priority order, and you can continue to work that way today. Which means that if you had the ebook priority as ebook pod as first priority, your end users would get the ebook offer. If there were also physical holdings, it would only then go to the physical pod should it not get filled by that ebook pod. From our libraries who we graciously tested the ebook functionality last fall, we learned that the libraries want to be able to allow the end users to have that option of physical versus ebook when it's available. So there is a new parameter in place, and I'll show you that parameter on the next slide. If that parameter is set to true, your users at your library, if you're participating in the ebook pod, will then see the get a physical copy option, the get an ebook option, and need a chapter option when relevant. Again, though, your users will not see the get an ebook option if it's not available through the ebook pod. They'll still get just the physical copy and the chapter. However, if you want the 3 tiles to present when relevant, there's a parameter that will need to be set to true in your environment. That new parameter is here under configuration, general other settings. That new parameter name is Rapido allow physical request for ebook offer. If this parameter is set to true in your environment, your end users, when relevant, will see the physical tile, their chapter tile, and additionally the ebook tile, regardless of your pod priority ranking of physical versus ebook first, giving that choice to your end users. If, as a library, you nest your ebook pod as first priority, what that does is it allows the request to then automatically fall to the physical pods should it not be filled by the ebook pod. Alternatively, or additionally, you can utilize mediation rules based on their format type changing to mediate requests that if they came in as an ebook request and didn't get filled and thus had to go to a physical pod and convert to a physical format type, you can be mediating those requests should you want to. There are mediation rule parameters that support that. Okay, a few frequently asked questions to share with you today, and then addressing questions that are put forward into the chat. So please, if you have questions, now is a great time to get them into the chat. Okay, recently, a few questions that have come up in library conversations 1. How do I customize my request forms? The answer is it depends on which request forms you're wanting to customize. Narrowing that scope to resource sharing request forms, there are still two different forms to really customize. One being the blank request form, and the other being the form that opens after your end users select in via a tile. So the blank form, we see about 7% of requests are submitted via the blank form. If you want to customize your blank form, you'll do so via configuration discovery, get a configuration resource sharing request. That allows you to customize which fields are on that form and which fields are that's mandatory or not mandatory. If you want to change the names of those fields or the language on that form, you'll do so under the labels. This form is often used if a request is for an item that is not found in Discovery, or sometimes libraries link out to this form on other web pages throughout their library website or elsewhere, and then this form would be accessed directly that way. If you want to be customizing the form that opens after the tiles, it's a different configuration pathway. So to customize the form that is opened up off of the tiles, you'll go in via configuration, resource sharing, request forms, the Rapido request form customization. There you'll be able to determine which fields are on that form and which fields you require as mandatory. If you want to customize the note on that form or the copyright statement on that form, you'll still see that those options under the configuration, resource sharing, request forms pathway. We see about 82% of requests are submitted via the forms that open up off of the tiles. So if you're prioritizing your request forms customization project, perhaps know that the majority of your requests are coming in via the tiles. All right, additional questions lately have come about regarding the topic of pods. Largely, those conversations have been what warrants the creation of new pods? How do I get new pods created? And the center of that question really comes down to community need. The creation and the terms of the pods are community driven. So if you need a new pod created, I would first check out the Rapido pods page and see what the existing pods are and if any of them are relevant to your library, and see the different terms that are defined for each pod, and you're creating a new pod, you will need to be defining the name of that pod and those new terms. Why might you need a new pod, or what warrants the need of a new pod is the community need. What are those kind of drivers that I've seen thus far? Some of that comes from libraries needing to prioritize their pods differently. So there may be a need for a new pod if you want to prioritize a subset of partners above or below other existing pods of partners that you have. Maybe you have preferred partners based on a geographical preference of use, consortial preference of use, maybe some sort of shipping agreements or other kind of arrangement that you have with these libraries that you want to be able to prioritize or change the hierarchy of them in some way. That creation of the pod can support those connections then and support you prioritizing that pod above or below or however mixed in amongst your existing pods today. Some of this new community need for pod prioritization can be driven in part by growth of the community. The example of this comes from there is the US pod today, there's also the US East pod, and then from that US East pod, there was the community ask and need for the creation of the US Southeast and the US Northeast pod. So it allows those libraries to exist in all of the pods that are relevant to them, but then order those pods based on geographical preference of priority of use. So perhaps a library in the Southeast might list the Southeast pod as highest priority, followed by the East pod, then the US pod, and additional pods after that. Another driver that I see in creating new pods in the Rapido community is there might be different pod terms that better service or support community connections within that group of libraries. So perhaps a group of libraries can work better together via different terms than the existing pod terms. Maybe they want to work together with a different loan period for certain items. We could create a new pod to support those connections and sharing of those items. Another example might be that came up in conversation with the library recently is, hey, we like working in this pod, but we notice that we have items that we aren't including in participating items because they're in offsite storage and we can't fill them in the delivery loan period of that pod. I think that's a great example of the need to create an additional pod with different loan period, or sorry, delivery terms. Loan period could also vary, or other aspects of the pod can vary based on community preference and need. But if they had that nationwide pod with the existing terms and an additional pod that had a longer delivery period, they could opt to include those items that they can only lend at that with that longer delivery period. Then libraries could participate in both pods, and perhaps the pod with the longer delivery period would be nested lower in the priority of use. That way, if the item was available at a faster turnaround time, um, it would be delivered in that pod with a shorter delivery term. So really, the creation of pods are driven by community need from conversations within the community. The Rapido listserv is a great platform for those conversations. Recently, seeing quite a bit of conversation about pod terms, etc. I think that's a great place for that. And once the community has identified a need amongst themselves, please reach out and we'll create the pods that support your connections with one another. So thank you for your time today. As always, I welcome you to reach out via email. I have a few different links that speak to different items I touched on today. I will grab those links, put them in the chat, and look to the chat for any questions that you've shared today. Oops. Okay. Navigating to find the links to share with you now. Okay. First question I see was related to the first release, the highlight of the customizing the reject reasons. Does the partner see the customizable reject reason? No, that is an visible, an only internally visible reject reason. They get the reject reason that is sent via the ISO standards. I see that a question is mirrored again in the chat, so hopefully that's clarified now. The reject reasons, the internal reject reasons, are only visible to the lender, they are not visible to the borrower. Okay. I see a question relating to a very specific workflow inquiry. I think let's connect outside of this session, just work through your workflow question. Um, Happy to meet with your library about your workflow question. Also, the Rapido listserv is a great opportunity for asking the community how they're handling various workflow scenarios. And I see, Katie, your question, let's connect off list. I'll have to follow up for you on that topic. And then I see another question regarding the reject reasons. Are they available in analytics? Not yet. We will be adding them to the analytics. It'll be an additional development. Okay, Those are the questions I see from the community in that chat today. If you're busy typing, please hit enter so that I can see your questions come through. Otherwise, please reach out through email and I'm happy to meet with you or work through any questions that you might have. Thank you. All right. Not seeing any questions, going to close the session.